Hi, it's me, Dr. P. Ayyappan, Assistant Professor, Department of Business Management, Erode Arts and Science College, Erode. Now let us see about capital. It refers to the funds invested in current assets of a firm, such as raw materials, work in progress, finished goods, receivables, cash, etc. From the viewpoint of manufacturing process, working capital means the part of capital which is required to keep the flow of production smooth and continuous. It is also referred to as revolving capital, as current assets and current liabilities are converted from one form to another and again converted back to original form and reconverted into other. Hence, it is called revolving capital or floating capital. So this working capital management requires monitoring a company's assets and liabilities to maintain sufficient cash flows to meet its short-term operating costs and short-term debt obligations. Working capital management involves tracking various ratios, including the working capital ratios, the collection ratios, and the inventory ratios. It can improve a company's cash flow management and earning quality by using its resources efficiently. So that efficient management of working capital, it's very important to any type of organization. There are several concepts of working capital. We just saw the working capital means investment in different current assets. Here two interpretations are possible. These are the value of all the current assets and the value of current assets minus the value of all current liabilities, because to the extent of current liabilities the firm's investment in current assets stands reduced. Accordingly, we have two concepts of working capital, that is gross working capital and net working capital. So this gross working capital refers to investment in all current assets. So the it refers to the that is again I repeat, it refers to the investment in all current assets, that is raw materials, work in progress, finished goods, um, book debts, bank balance, and cash balance also. The gross concept of working capital is significant in the context of measuring working capital needed, measuring the size of business, continued and smooth flow of operation of business and the like. So the next concept, net working capital, it refers to the excess of current assets over current liability. So the formula that we are using as for the gross working capital, so the working capital equal to the current assets. For the formula for net working capital, that is equal to current assets minus current liabilities. That is the value of current assets minus the value of current liabilities. That current liabilities includes trade creditors, bills payable, outstanding expenses such as wages, salaries, dividend has to be payable, and tax payable, bank overdraft, etc. So the net concept of working capital is significant in the context of financing of working capital, the short-term liquidity aspects of the business, and the like. Next, let us see about the types of working capital. So there are two kinds of working capital. These are permanent working capital and temporary working capital on the base of the time. But on the base of the concept, okay, so the previous slide that we had seen about this gross working capital and net working capital. So on the base of the concept, we can further classify it into two, that is gross working capital and net working capital. So now we move on to this basis of the time: permanent or fixed working capital, temporary or variable working capital. Let's see this diagram, which can be understandable. It's very easily what is called as a temporary and what is called as permanent working capital. So such a type of, see this up to A, okay, 0 to A, and A to B, A to B. It is such a type of this much, no, such a type, this type of working capital is needed for the company, for the company which are certain amount of the working capital is needed to run the business operations is very smoothly, but it remains constant on any any type of output or for a certain period. Okay, so the company no need to change or whether it's increase or decrease for a smooth flow of business operations. They need such a quantum of working capital that's called as a permanent working capital. Okay, the next is a temporary or maybe this varying working capital. Okay, so the temporary or varying working capital, it's varies now. See this, there is a fluctuation, no? This curve and see this A to D, it gets fluctuated, no? From time to time. So the reason in the sense, it may be this called as a seasons or any other such a type of special working capital. It's further can be classified. Some seasons, okay, you may be uh, available of raw material with the least cost or maybe the seasonal demands, where you maybe look on for a huge amount of the sales, so that you have to invest much more in the inventories and the sales also, so the demand. So on that time only you may be in need of some amount of the working capital in addition with this permanent working capital. So after the season gets over, so automatically you may reduce your working capital. Okay, then next after such a period again maybe the season maybe starts. So that time only you have to keep your working capital is over and above the permanent working capital, so that it's called as a temporary or maybe this varying working capital. So this temporary and varying working capital further divided into seasonal working capital and special working capital. Some business operations require additional working capital during a particular season. For example, the groundnut oil producer may have to purchase groundnuts in particular season only and have to employ additional labor for that purpose. So these may require additional funds for a temporary period, which may be called as a seasonal working capital. So that the temporary working capital further divided into this two, that is a seasonal capital, and the second one as a special working capital. In all enterprises, some unforeseen events do occur, like sudden increase in demand and downward movement of price of raw materials, strike or natural calamities, which when extra funds are needed to tide over such type of situations. Such type of extra funds is called as a special working capital. So both the working capital, okay, permanent or maybe this temporary, are necessary to facilitate this the production and sales through the operating cycle. So however, the temporary working capital is created by the firm to meet the liquidity requirements that will last only temporary. So the next, let us see. Right. Okay. So let us see about determinants of working capital. So that the company has to maintain such a level of working capital in maybe either maybe this temporary or maybe the fixed. Okay. So there are no set of rules or a formula to determine the working capital requirements of a firm, but the corporate management has to consider the various factors in making decisions regarding working capital balances. An appraisal of these would provide guidance to management in estimating prospective needs. These are called determinants of working capital. The firm must estimate its working capital very accurately, because excessive working capital results unnecessary accumulation of inventory and waste of capital, whereas shortage of working capital affects the smooth flow of operating cycle and business fails to meet its commitment. So how to maintain certain balance of working capital which won't be excessive or maybe the shortage of working capital. So this it is a valid one when we are fixing the requirement level of working capital. We have to consider these are all the determinants. Okay, so the first determinant, okay, that is nature of business is one of the factors. Usually in trading businesses, the working capital needs are higher, as most of their investment is found concentrated in stock. On the other hand, manufacturing or processing business need relatively lower compared to that of trading business, or maybe the level of working capital. In terms of higher and lower, used above or relatively and not absolute. That is, of the total capital employed in the businesses are higher or maybe the lower, as the case may be, portion is employed in current assets. Okay, so the next one is a sales and demand conditions of a firm also affect its working capital position. It is difficult to precisely determine the relationship between the volume of sales and working capital needs. Sales depends on the demand conditions. Most of the firms experience seasonal and cyclical fluctuations in the demand of their products and services. These business variations affects the working capital. So whenever the sales or maybe the demand depends on sales depends on the demand. So the working capital requirements of always depends on the sales. Whenever you are looking for a huge sales, you have to move on to the huge amount of the production. So that huge amount of production requires more amount of working capital, uh, that is for purchasing of the inventories and giving a salary to the employees. So that you may be need of and the additional working capital. So the next one is a manufacturing policy. The manufacturing cycle of a firm also affects the requirement of working capital. The manufacturing cycle compresses the purchase and use of raw material and production of finished goods. Longer the manufacturing cycle, larger will be the firm's working capital requirement, vice versa. So that the policy, okay, the manufacturing policy determines the working capital requirements. The next, the determinant or a factor is credit policy. In the present day circumstances, almost all units have to sell goods on credit. So the nature of the credit policy is an important consideration in deciding the amount of working capital requirements. The larger the volume of credit sales, the greater will be the requirement of working capital. Generally, the credit policy of the individual firm depends on the norms of the industry to which the firm belongs, and also the credit periods. It also influences the size and composition of working capital. Okay, when the longer credit period is allowed to customers as against that one extend to the firm by its suppliers, more working capital is needed and vice versa. In the former case, there will be a relatively higher trade debtors, and in the later, there will be a higher trade creditors. Uh, the next determinant is a collection policy. So, is another that is a factor influencing the that is a capital working capital requirements. That is a yes, stringent collection policy might not only deter all away some credit seeking customers, also force existing customer to be prompt in settling dues, resulting in lower level of working capital. The opposite is true with the liberal collection policy. So that leads to huge amount of that is a data, there is a chance for bad debts also when you are following this liberal credit collection policy. The next one is availability of the credit. Okay, so based on this goodwill and reputation maintained in the society and this in the banking side, you may have this type of availability of the credit from banks and financial institutions. This also influence this working capital requirement of a firm. The availability of the credit to a firm depends upon the credit worthiness. No, that already I told you. Okay, that if the firm has a good credit standing in the market, it can get credit easily on favorable terms and conditions. It will require less working capital. Whenever they are in need of this working capital, so they can utilize this the funds from this financial institutions and banks. Okay. The next one is operating efficiency of a firm. Relates to this optimum utilization of the resources and minimum cost. If the firm is efficient in controlling its operating costs and utilizing its current assets, then it helps to keeping the working capital at lower level. The use of working capital is improved and pace of cash conversion cycle is accelerated with operating efficiency. The next about that as a price level changes also affect the level of working capital. Generally, rising price levels will require a firm to maintain higher amount of working capital. However, the effect of rising prices, no, may be different from different companies, as though the general policy level increases, the individual prices may move differently. Therefore, some firms may require more working capital, while other may require less working capital in case of price rise. Whatever it is, the price level changes affects this working capital requirement decision. The next one is the level of trading is another factor. Okay, the level of trading. There are two levels of trading, that is over trading and under trading. Over trading means the business wants to maximize turnover with inadequate stock level, production cycle, and swiftest collection from data. Eventually, the working capital will be lower. No? It is no good. However, for the business is starved of its legitimate working capital needs. Under trading is opposite for over trading. Okay. The next one is a growth and expansion plan. When the company is looking for the growth and expansion plans, so by parallel it has to increase this working capital requirements. So when the companies yeah, or running in the same way whatever without any growth and compensation expansion plans, they no need to increase they no need to maintain any changes in working capital, so that the growth and expansion plan has to be considered. Okay, the next one is a system of production process is another factor that has bearing. If the capital intensive high technology automated system is adopted for production, more investment in fixed assets and less investment in current assets are involved. Also, the conversion time is likely to be lower, resulting in further drop in level of working capital. On the other hand, if labor intensive technology is adopted, less investment in fixed assets and more investment in current assets, especially work in progress due to inclusion of an enhanced wage component and prolonged processing research. So that the system of production process also is a main contributor in this working capital decisions. The next one as a dividend policy. A desire to maintain an established dividend policy may affect working capital. Often changes in working capital bring about an adjustment of dividend policy. So the relationship between dividend policy and working capital, dividend policy and working capital is well established, and very few companies declare a dividend without giving a due consideration to its effects on cash and other needs of cash. The shortage of working capital often acts as a powerful reason for reducing or skipping of a cash dividend. On the other hand, strong position may justify continuing dividend payment. So whatever it is, company has to consider the available of the working capital before making any decisions in this dividend policy. So that if the company declares the cash dividends, automatically that is depends upon the fund available in working capital. So that while considering this working capital requirement, have the company has to look on this dividend policy also. The final one, okay, finally, our rapidity of turnover comes. There is a negative correlation between rapidity of turnover and size of working capital. When sales are fast and swift, lower is the investment in current working capital. Actually, stock of inventory is very minimum. But when sales are happening for and in between, that is rather slow, as in the case of jewelry, elaborate investment in working capital results. So that type of industry needs much more amount of working capital. That because there is a very minimum amount of the turnover we may be looking of, so that leads to higher huge investment in working capital. Thus, faster sales leads to lower working capital and vice versa. Okay, so that these are all the determinants which has to be considered while taking any working capital decisions. Okay, so the next, let us see this, which is the optimum level of working capital. Okay, the firm has to maintain an adequate level. Already we have, I said that no, and that the excessive and this no lower amount of working capital that leads to negative impact to the organization. So that the company has to maintain optimum level of working capital. A firm has to maintain an adequate level of working capital to run its operation smoothly and effectively. It should be adequate in the sense that it shall not be more than the requirement, nor nor it shall be less than the requirement. Both the excessive and as well as the inadequate, no, that is working capital positions are dangerous from the firm's point of view. So there may be a lot of disadvantages. So let us disadvantages of redundant or excessive working capital. So excessive working capital means idle funds which earn no profits of the business, and hence the business cannot earn a proper rate of return on its investments. When there is a redundant working capital, it may lead to unnecessary purchasing, no? Unnecessary purchasing and accumulation of inventories, causing more chance of theft, waste, and losses. So the excessive working capital implies excessive debtors and a defective credit policy, which may cause higher incidence of bad debts. It may result into overall inefficiency of our organization. When there is a excessive working capital, relations with banks and other financial institutions may not be maintained. Due to lower rate of return on investment, the value of the shares may also fall. The redundant working capital gives rise to speculative transactions. Show that okay, it gives a huge disadvantages if the firm maintain this excessive or redundant working capital. Next one is inadequate or working capital. Okay, inadequate working capital also a great danger to this organization. A concern which has inadequate working capital cannot pay its short-term liabilities in time. Thus, it will lose its reputation and shall not be able to get good credit facilities. It cannot buy its requirements in bulk and cannot avail of discounts, etc. It becomes difficult for the firm to exploit favorable market conditions and undertake profitable projects due to lack of working capital. The firm cannot pay day to day expenses for its operations, and it creates inefficiencies, increases costs, and reduces the profit of the business. It becomes impossible to utilize efficiently the fixed assets due to non availability of liquid funds. The rate of return on investments also falls with the shortage of, so that the working capital management is a very important thing for every organization. Okay, that is taking decision in this working capital is it reflects, it gives a much more impact on this profitability of any organization and also the goodwill of the organization, so that the company has to maintain optimum level of working capital. So the company has to consider, okay, while fixing the level of requirements, the has to consider the above mentioned the factors, okay, so that the company has to concentrate much more, okay, in this working capital management also. With this, I like to wind up this session. Thank you. Thank you very much.